my mom, Stalker, was standing there with the .22 caliber rifle that they had told the police about twice.
Oh my God, it's just infuriating me.
So he knocked on the door, and my older brother was awake, and he answered the door. I drop the phone when I see someone running towards me, and I run into the basement and I hide. And my younger brother pulls me out, and I just remember looking at him and begging him to leave me.
I want to thank you for being here. This is what we're about to get into is obviously a very profound, powerful, and heavy story. And me personally, after hearing some snippets on you sharing that story online, I just thought it was, incredibly brave of you and profound as well to share that story publicly and everything you've been through. So I would love for you to, start as far back as you want for people that are listening to get the full picture of what we're about to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a tiny, predominantly Métis community. So a lot of American listeners might not know what Métis is. Here in the States, when you're talking about Indigenous people, you often refer to them as Native American. And in Canada, we refer to Indigenous people as Indigenous or by their background. So there's First Nations, which are many different nations, and then Inuit and Métis. And so I'm Métis, and my father was Métis as well. I grew up in a small 300-person community. It still holds strong at 300 people. And it's a place that I call home. So again, for listeners that might be, a little confused when I say home, I talk about home as in my soul's home, which is this community, which was the name of it is St. Eustache. And then now I reside in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is just south of Toronto. And so I grew up there with my family, my mother and father. Their names were Sherry and Morris Paul, and my two brothers, Carson, Scott, and then my younger brother, Clinton Paul. And we lived what you would consider a normal life. And I say this always because I want people to kind of think for a moment and stop to think, if I didn't say a normal life or if I was exposed to, say, violence, I challenge you to think, would you listen to my story the same? Right. And I am obviously very aware of it. I'm white passing as well. So my mother was non-Indigenous. So I have privilege in that. And I think it's an honor that I get to share my story. And I think it's important that I do because maybe people will listen to me a little bit more, which is sad, but it's the privilege and that I have. So I will continue to share my story for those purposes. So I grew up there with them. I'm going to go back to the 90s now. So in 1992, a community member, he grew increasingly obsessed with my mom. And he started to make her and my dad feel uncomfortable. He was someone that I knew. Like I said, it's 300 people. It's not as if I didn't know him growing up. And, he would be at functions in the community. However, he was coined the town bully because he was known for his behaviors, alcoholism, and just his violence, really. So, he was someone that we knew, and he grew increasingly obsessed with my mother. And so it was 1992 in November, and I remember this day very clearly. It was specifically me, my mom, and my dad. We were heading to Winnipeg for a colleague's birthday of my mother. She worked at the hospital in Winnipeg, and we were going there, and I got really sick on the way. So we turned the car around, and my mother continued on. And the reason why this is important was she was going to a birthday, and it was the same day as my mother's Stalker's birthday. And so he had somehow got wind that, we were heading to Winnipeg that day, and he called the next day, and he threatened my mother's life. So he called, and his initial call was, where's my birthday cake? And my mother said, I threw it in the garbage. There was no birthday cake, but it's one of those situations I think of when I think of her saying that. I think of it's like a woman just being like, this is done.
Of course.
Like, I threw it in the garbage. I have to go. She said, we're going to the kids' bingo. Our community was really tight knit. My parents were involved, and there was a children's kids' bingo for family night. So we were all going to that. And she's like, I have to go. And she hung up the phone. And then he called back. And that's when he told her that she wouldn't live to see her next birthday and that he wouldn't live to see his. Yeah. So I was I was just shy of 9 at that time. I hadn't turned 9 years old yet. And we went to the bingo. And something must have happened for my mom to have stayed at the house at that point. I don't know if it was, it's better off for me not to go to the bingo, or if she was just running behind. I'm not quite sure why, but she had stayed behind. And at one point, my dad made my younger brother and I move tables, and we moved over to my parents' best friend's table, Ken and Debbie Bowden, and that's also my best friend's parents. So we sat with them. I didn't think anything of it either, but I found out later as an adult that my mom's stalker had actually come into the hall that night, and it was believed that he had a sawed-off .22 caliber rifle under his coat. And so luckily my dad dipped into a room where there was a landline, because there's no cell phones, right? It's the 90s. And he called my mom, and then my mom had went over to my aunt's house. And that's when the RCMP came over. So again, for American listeners, the RCMP is the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. And so they came over, took my mom's statement, and my mom had told them that she was concerned that he had a .22 caliber rifle. And they arrested him, and they brought him before a judge that night, but they failed to mention my mom's concerns that he had a .22 caliber rifle. Nothing was said, nothing was ever filed. He was charged that night, and there was restrictions put on him. I don't want to say, because I actually should look this up because I don't remember what the proper term was, but it's not a restraining order at that time, but essentially like a restraining order. So it was a piece of paper. And my mom's mom, my grandma, used to always say, like, what does a piece of paper really do? It does nothing to protect you.
What's with the negligence of them not mentioning the sawed-off shotgun as such a significant detail?
Yeah. So they will chalk it up to human error. And there are several pieces that you'll hear throughout my story that the RCMP and a judge in an inquiry about their misconduct as well also says it's human error. But the RCMP are known for the way that they treat Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, and that's the unfortunate part. So, and
where did it come up that he might or did have a shotgun on him? Like, was that something that she was told or you were told? Like, how did that come about?
I think it was just well known in the community. Or you mean that night? Like,
specifically.
Yeah, that night I think it was just known by amongst the community members that he had a gun that night that he had come in with. He was someone that, community members were quite often scared of, from what I've read over the years of people that were interviewed in the newspaper, and that was sometimes some of the things that people had said that they were concerned. I know a community member had told me within the last couple of years that they remember when they were younger, they were going to, how people have like parties, stag and does, they're called in Canada, to like come together to raise money. Mm-hmm. They had something like that, like at a local hall, and people were coming together, and that he jumped in, and that he all of a sudden pulled out of the van, and then he pulled out a weapon. And everyone was like, what are you doing? Like, they're just all going to have a good time and to like go and drink and dance. And you have him who has this weapon. I mean, he was well known to the RCMP for mostly drinking and driving charges, but he was nonetheless well known to them as well.
And so what happens next? So after this is right now, we're at the place where you got this restraining order, for lack of better words, and now what? Yeah,
so now it's December of 1992, and my mom continues to hear that my father continue to hear that he's not he's relentless, that he's not giving up, that he can't live without her, and that he wants to, he can't live without her, essentially. And so they're hearing these death threats. Actually, recently I read in an article where someone was interviewed, and they said that they remember him saying that he was threatening my parents' life still after the charges were laid. And you have to remember, when you stood on my street, if you just walked like, halfway down my street, you could see through a field and you could see his home. So it's like it's a small community. Everyone knows everyone, right? And so my mom wrote the RCMP a letter. She was concerned, again, about the 22 caliber rifle, but then she had heard that he might have a handgun. So she wrote them a letter. I don't know if it was the 90s because, there wasn't, you didn't call, or did she want it in writing? And again, this letter was never actually filed. Never filed.
And the receipt, it was confirmed that it was received.
It was confirmed that it was received because there was an inquiry, and in the inquiry, they say that it was never filed. Yeah. It just awful. So then my parents continue on with this court case, and they find out that instead of going on the desk of a criminal crown, because there's uttering threats, right? Like, it went accidentally on someone's a crown for family law. He wasn't related to us in no way. Like, the man had uttered threats, and they wanted a mediation. So, like, my mom's mom would say how they were, like, completely losing faith in the system at this point because nothing was done. It just kept, kind of spinning the wheels. Nothing was actually making any kind of progress in moving forward with some sort of justice.
Yeah, and this is prior to anything happening. And that's what makes it so much more difficult to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like leading up to all of it. So now at one point there's a clerk who's in a temp position, and she accidentally mailed my mom some of her stalker's documents, and he got some of hers. What documents? I don't know. That was never made clear to me. I just know that there was, again, human error, and they each received each other's documents, and what they were exactly, I don't know, but I could just imagine that probably set him off in some way. And then obviously my mom, that just, confirmed my father's fear that nothing is actually being done for them in this situation at all.
So at this point or at any point, did you guys feel like you had to take it in your own hands due to this lack of faith in the system? So I was only 9 when this happened at this point, right. And my older brother was 17. My younger brother was 5 when it had started. And my parents were, I'm just telling everyone their age right now. So my mom was 36 and my dad was 37. He was just shy of 38. And so for me, I remember, my parents didn't want to scare us for anything. Like, I didn't know the court documents. I didn't even know, like, to be scared that night or anything of that whole situation. But I had asked one of my dad's friends recently. I said, do you think my dad was scared? And he was like, yeah, he was genuinely scared. He thought something was going to happen. And I just was taken back because, I don't know, for so long I just felt like maybe they didn't think anything. Like, maybe they weren't scared. I think there's a hope in thinking that they weren't scared because there was so much failure that you're thinking, I mean, I've been there where, I thought, oh, am I making a big deal out of this? Right, because no one else is taking it seriously.
Yeah.
But how do you, at the same time, that seems so difficult to balance because the threats are clearly real.
Right.
So it's almost the opposite effect of how can they not take this seriously?
Yeah. And so now they have to go for this mediation. And the week of this mediation, my mom, like I said, she worked at a hospital in Winnipeg, and there was a woman who was shot and killed outside of her hospital. And my mom's first instincts were to run outside and to see the color of the woman's hair because she thought that the bullet was meant for her. The woman was killed at a bus stop, and she was actually shot and killed by her own stalker. And that same week, another woman in Manitoba was also shot and killed by her stalker.
These are two completely different cases?
Two completely different cases, and they all landed in the same week.
And it was confirmed that these two stalkers were no ties to...
Not to my mother, but to each of the other women they had. I believe one woman, it was her ex-husband, and the other one was, all was mentioned is that it was a stalker of hers.
Now, I don't want to veer off from you completing, the initial phase of the story, but what is the meaning behind that? Why is this so consistent, or is this just coincidence, or is there something else going on that you theorized?
So no, there happened to be at that time in Manitoba laws that were in place. I don't know the proper legal jargon, but there were laws that were in place, but they weren't being enacted at that time. So there wasn't enough protection for women that had stalkers. And so I do know that from that, there have been many research papers that I've seen that from those three women dying, that things had changed following it.
So with these two cases that happened at this point, did that ignite anything with the police enforcement?
Nothing with the police, but that's what initiated my mom's decision not to go to the mediation, because she wanted to move forward with charging him criminally. And so she decided not to go to the mediation, and that was on January 26th. And so he was released, right? Because so he had to go to court or however that worked, and then he was released. And he was released again on the 26th. And he went on a drinking bender, and people said like he was, I believe, taking prescription drugs that night. And he had continued doing that. And then just after midnight on the 27th of January, he came to our home. And so he knocked on the door, and my older brother was awake. He was waiting for a friend to come over, and he answered the door, and my mom's stalker was standing there with the .22 caliber rifle that they had told the police about twice. And he ordered my brother to go into the basement of our home. We were all sleeping at that point. We didn't hear anything. And he held my brother hostage in the basement, and, he verbally tortured him. And at one point he had my brother write a will for him, suicide note, I guess, to say that, or his reasoning for what he was doing, I guess.
So he was writing the note on behalf of the stalker. Mm-hmm. And what happens next?
Tied my brother up and told my brother that he was going to go upstairs and do the deed. And my brother shortly after heard my father yell. I don't know if he heard my mom scream or, the order of it, but he heard my father yell, say something in French to him. It's a French Métis community. And he then heard a gunshot. And so my brother thankfully was able to escape from a basement window. And he had, in fact, shot and killed my father right away. And that's what woke up me. And I don't know if that's what woke up my younger brother, but it's what had woken up me. And then I came to my bedroom door, and I could see my brother standing in his door, just screaming and crying. And I tried to push my mom's bedroom door open because I have no idea what's happening at this point. And I was met with resistance. There was someone standing behind the door because it would open, just not open all the way. And so then I ran to the phone. And at that time, it was a 7-digit number to call what's now is 911. So I'll just say 911 for the rest of this episode, just because it's easier for people to understand. So I go to call 911, but I actually dialed the wrong number. And then at that point, I could see the shadow running towards me because it was in the middle of the night. All the lights were off in the house. I think that my brother's bedroom light was on. Because I remember he's lit up in my memory. Like I could see him clearly. And then I ran down the hallway and I call and I drop the phone when I see someone running towards me, and I run into the basement and I hide. And I just looking at myself because I'm standing, I don't do a good job at hiding. I'm hiding behind a door, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm thinking, what is happening? Like I had no idea. The way my brain just thinks of the memory of me standing there, it was just like I could not wrap my head around what was happening. It's like when you wake up and, not in comparison, but like you're so disoriented. You're like, I don't even know what's happening right now. That's how the memory is in my mind.
And so at this point, obviously you're only 9 years old, and I know you said you don't really know what's going on. So to you, by the time you got to that door, do you feel or recall that you recognize it as a gun, or is it just a loud noise at this age? I'm not sure what you comprehend.
Nothing. I have no idea it's not even, I don't even know if like I could hear the gunshot. I don't have a memory of a gunshot in my head. It was just that I was woken up. Whether it was my mom screaming or what it was, my brother crying. So now I'm in the basement. It's not long. They come into the basement and my younger brother pulls me out. And I just remember looking at him and begging him to leave me alone. Like, just leave me. Don't pull me out. And he does. But I mean, to be fair, they're right there, my mom and her stalker. And now he's livid because he realizes that my older brother isn't in the house. And at one point he turns to my mom and he says, you have to choose which one of your children are going to die if we can't find him. And so we all volunteer to look for my older brother. So we look in all the places in the basement. I mean, it's a tiny bungalow. It's not like we lived in a big house. And so we look. I feel like we were looking for quite some time, and he always followed behind us because he didn't believe that my brother wasn't there. And eventually my mom turns to me at some point, I think when he's like distracted, and she says, I'm going to go upstairs with him, stay down here and call for help. And she said, I love you. And then we're sitting on the stairs. I know he threatens our lives again. And that's when my mom's like, hey, let's go upstairs. And she wants to separate him from us. What she says, I have no idea, but like, I can't remember. And he takes her upstairs and they go upstairs and we stay in the basement. This was now around 3:30. So to go back a little bit, because my brother escaped at 2:30. He ran to the nearby neighbor's home. He actually stopped at my aunt's house. He didn't wake anyone up there to get a pair of shoes because it was the middle of January. And then he continued on and he ran to Ken and Debbie Bowden's home. And that's where the first 911 call goes in from their home. And the way the chain of command would go is my brother calls the 911 dispatcher. Then they tell the two officers that are on duty at the police station that is like patrols our community. That's about 40 minutes because we're in rural Manitoba, right? So it's 40 minutes away. And now it's past 2:30. It's around 2:30 and it closes then. So they're actually already in Winnipeg at their homes when they get this call. And they're told that by name, my mom's stalker, because again, this police station knows my mom's stalker. And they say his name, that he's in our home. He's holding us hostage, that they have Carson on the phone. He's saying that he's there and that he has a gun. And from there, they are supposed to let the constable know on duty. And they call the constable to let him know. And he says, again, by name, go out to the Paul residence. That's my family's last name. And see if you can talk to him. Secure the area and call me when you get back or when you get there. And then he hung up the phone, and instead of calling a hostage negotiator or calling for backup or anything, he hangs up the phone and he accidentally falls back asleep.
What?
Yeah.
No, that's just open news that he admitted to falling asleep?
Yep. A human error.
Another human error.
Mm-hmm.
And so where does this go now if you fell asleep? Where are you?
So it stalled. So those two officers now have to come from Winnipeg, which we're looking at, like, depending where they live, like, let's just say an hour. We're waiting for them to come. It takes so long that when I'm in the basement with my younger brother, a second 911 call is going in through from the Bowden residence with my brother to say, like, where are you? Where are you guys? And also my brother alerts them not to come down the road with their lights on because they're so concerned that they're going to alert him and like that he's going to do more damage. They can also see from that house that my bedroom light is being flicked on and off for my mom signaling for help.
And she's by herself in the room at this point, or the guy's letting her do that?
Yeah, I mean, she must have just been doing it like with him there, right? Okay. So we're still in the basement. We actually fall asleep, my younger brother and I wake up at 5:30, and I'm woken up by what I can only assume is another gunshot. At that point, he had shot my mom in the arm. So I run upstairs with my younger brother, and now I'm trying to get into my bedroom because that's where they are. And I try to push the door open, and I could hear my mom say on the other side of the door, "Why do you have to shoot me? You already shot me in the arm." I hear her say, "Why do you have to shoot me? You already shot me in the eye." And I don't understand that at all, but I hear that she's hurt and that she's shot. So I run into my parents' room and I get up on my parents' bed and I call for help. I call for help at one point and a 911 dispatcher hangs up on me.
Before they hung up, what did you get at? What were you
I don't know what I said. I actually didn't even know that had happened, but that's in court documents, that I had no idea that had even happened, because I was on the phone so much that night calling, because I call again at one point in the night and I ask for 3 ambulance because I don't know where my brother is. So I'm so concerned that he's hurt somewhere. And at this point I look over and I see my dad is lying on the bed and I'm like, when I say I got a feeling of relief, like I can feel what I felt in my body because I was like, he's there. Oh my God, why is he waking up? And it's your dad, you think he's going to help me. Right. And so I start shaking him because he had a blanket over him. I don't see anything, but I react from how my brother reacts. And I know that he saw something and then he screams. And I just left my dad alone at that point. I realized that he's hurt and I just leave him. My brain never told me in that moment that he was dead. It was just leave him alone. And so I continue. I'm sitting on the bed. I'm, calling for help. And then eventually at 5:30, while I had run up and going through all of this, my brother is finally, only at 5:30, taken to, at that point, give a statement.
So this is 2.5 hours later, at least? Much longer?
3 hours later, right?
It's been 3 hours since this all occurred.
Since the initial 911 call went in.
And how far approximately the house that your brother ran to eventually to make the call?
It's pretty close, close enough you could see, like I said, that you could, it's a country block away. It's right there. Okay. Yeah. So now the officers are outside, but there's no one else there at that point. They are shortly after setting, at some point between, let's say, 5:30 and 6, they're setting up a command post in Eli, which is about 10 minutes from my community. And we don't know why. That was also brought into question, why so far away? Why didn't you do it in our community? We have a town hall. There's a church. There's other places they could have set up so that they weren't 10 more minutes out of the way. And so... yeah, they take my brother finally to give a statement because at that point, they don't know, they haven't heard anything else other than that initial 911 call. In between all of this, they do make contact with my mom. So they call the home and my mom answers. And this just gives you an idea as to how intoxicated he was, the drugs he was on, because why on earth would it be normal for my mom to answer the phone at that time of night? And I'm grateful for him being so out of it because she could get on the phone at least, but she was answering one-sided questions. They asked, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I don't know." She answered a lot of the questions, "I don't know," because she's in shock and you have someone standing next to her who's threatening her life. So she just said, "I don't know. Is your husband okay? I don't know." And then eventually she just said, "I have to go. Can you call me in the morning? I have to go." And then they were able to say, help is on the way.
At this point, this is coming from the command post.
I don't know where it comes from. I feel like I think it was the officers. I think that was the initial contact that they made from outside of the home when they were told, make contact and see if he could come out and talk. Like, I don't even understand in a hostage negotiation. And it is also that constable who fell back asleep was the only hostage negotiator for that police station.
Oh my God, this is fucking infuriating me. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we continue to wait. And now it's 6:30 and he turns the gun on my mom. She tries to leave my bedroom and he shoots her in the shoulder. But the type of weapon it is, the bullet spins. And so it severed her spine and she died immediately in front of my younger brother and I. And then I hear a noise. And the only noise that for hearing the gunshots, the only noise that I can associate with a gunshot is the sound of, it sounded like he got really mad and he knocked over my shelf in my room. It was just a loud bang. And that's all I heard. And I thought, oh my God, he's so mad. He's going to come in here. Like, we were in the next room. It was all he had to do was fire through that wall and one of us could have got shot. And he turned the gun on himself and he killed himself on my bedroom floor. So I have no idea that he did this. And this was right after my mom died and fell to the ground. And so we wait. It's 6:30 and there's 3 dead bodies in the house with us. And there are no SWAT outside of our home, and we continue to wait. At one point, I take the phone off the hook because I'm concerned that with them calling the house, like they tried to make contact with me, that they were going to alert him and he would come in. I mean, he would hear me talking on the phone. At one point, they ask where he is, where my parents are, if I could jump out a window, would it be safe for us to get out? And, I tell them no. I'm also have to tell them where everyone is in the house. And my older brother, witnessed them using a ruler to draw out a map. It was a 3-bedroom bungalow. Like, it was a tiny house. The lack of urgency. That was also something that was brought up in, there was an inquiry, obviously, in the police misconduct. And so that was brought up. And so we continued to wait. And at 7 a.m., my mom's alarm went off. And that scared me because I thought he's going to come in here. Because she should have been waking us up to get ready for school. And we waited. And it's not until 8:30 in the morning that they finally enter our home.
They're still at now they just entered the home? Mm-hmm. And you guys have been alone for several hours at this point? 2
hours with 3 dead bodies in our house.
Is there anything that you recollect in regards to a conversation with you and your brother at this point, or is just sitting there in silence?
Sitting in silence, scared. When the RCMP came in, I hear them say, "This one's gone, this one's gone, this one's gone," like yell out.
And did they come to you? When did they come to you? Do you remember any consolation?
They actually don't ever come to me. The RCMP don't. They go straight to, like, the SWAT comes in, and then following behind them are 2 EMTs that come in and throw blankets over us, and they carry us out. The EMTs are my childhood friends' fathers, so familiar faces. And in the whole situation, they're the heroes.
My heart is just throbbing right now for you that you guys had to go through this experience, and for you to sit here and explain it. There are no words, and I just commend your bravery for being willing to share this.
Thank you.
And I thank you for that. I have no words to offer any consolation because I think you've had plenty of years to go through this on your own.
Yeah.
But is there anything in the immediate future after this that stands out for you now that your life has been...
Yeah. So there is an inquiry. My family fights really hard for there to be an inquiry. They can only do an inquiry, though, for my mother. Well, the police misconduct, obviously, but in relation to my mother's death, because they can't prove, which is wild considering how many, human errors there were leading up to it, but they can't prove that my father would have been alive. So with my mother, they could fight that she may have been alive if they could have gotten into the home faster. And I mean, it's like top for victim blaming. One RCMP officer took the stand and said that only my mom knew the grave danger that she was in, that she should have done more. The judge blamed the town, all the people in the town, saying that they should have done more. And that's when someone's quoted to say, like, I was scared of him. What would we do? Right? When I myself am scared of him. When they actually remained anonymous in this newspaper article. And so they went through the inquiry, and ultimately there was no one was held accountable for it. We had to move from my community that I grew up in, and I moved to St. Catharines, where I live now, because that's where my mom's side of the family was from. My mom's stalker let her write a note that night. They had got their affairs in order somewhat, and like they started to warn us. This is what I'll say. Like, a lot of people ask, like, did you know anything leading up to it? And there was no fear for us kids. I do remember, though, my dad always saying, like, if anything happens, what do you do? Who do you call? If something were to happen, make sure that you say, you're Morris Paul's daughter, and that because my dad was a volunteer firefighter for our community. And I remember saying that night when I called, I said, I'm Morris Paul's daughter. Like, I literally remember him saying these things, and, he had prepared me for it. So we had to move away, and that was really hard. And then part of it was we had to see if we qualified for, obviously mental health support is nowhere where it needs to be now, and definitely not in the 90s. And so my aunt brought me and my younger brother for play-based therapy. And I used to say graciously that we went twice, but we went once, and it was confirmed by a family member just actually a couple of years ago. And then we never went again because unfortunately, my aunt, who was my legal guardian, just kept the money instead of bringing us for therapy. Yeah. So, that was difficult. And so obviously, I don't know. We lived a normal life, let's say. Like, I don't know how to say it any other way because it was our normal. Like, I lived with my grandmother. My grandma raised me for part of my life, and my brother was actually raised by that aunt, my younger brother, but my older brother turned 18 within a couple months of my parents dying. And then, at one point I do move back to Manitoba. That is a whole other story, but I do move back to Manitoba, thankfully, because I fought really hard. I wanted to graduate with all my friends that I had known my whole life. And not to say I always want to, acknowledge I have such a great support system in St. Catharines, but when I was young, it was like, I want to move home. I want to go back there. It was never a place like I understand some people don't want to go back to where the trauma happened. I think if I didn't go back, I'd be a lot different of a person.
I'm sure. I wonder what the effect was going back there. How do you reflect on that?
Healing. Like, I could stay connected to it in a positive way, even though it's like something that's so negative, where my younger brother didn't. He went back a couple times, but he didn't want to go. My older brother most certainly didn't want to go either.
You've often used the word normal when obviously everything you have no choice for it to become an absolute new normal.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting point of going back to where it happened, because at least some of the normality that did exist remained there. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that constant was in fact what you just expressed as healing.
Yeah, like I think I just shifted it, and I just looked at it like all the positive that was there. That is where I got to be with my mom and dad, and that is where I had my family all together in one place. So I just hold it in my mind as something like that,
And what did you see in the effect of, since it was just a very small town of 300 people, I believe you said,
yeah.
Obviously, let alone how big the town was, that it would obviously be a big headline. So how did you remember any big difference in regards to the way you were treated around the town after this event that may have affected you?
No, nothing like that. I feel like everyone's been always really good. I still go home there. I call it my home, and I bring my kids there too, so that they know like the connection to it. If anything, I feel like everyone's just been really good with wanting to continue to see me as Morris Paul's daughter, which is like, you always want that, right? You want his friends to see you that way. And actually, I was just home a couple weeks ago, and I was in the store, and the woman at the counter who was working at the corner store said, "Oh, I know you." And she said, "My husband was your dad's best man." Oh. And like, I know who he is. I've seen him. And I just thought, oh, I love that, And so
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And imagine I didn't go home, I wouldn't have that. So I'm grateful I did. It took me a long time till I was an adult to realize that there was an impact on the community and the people there too. Like, yes, I lost my parents, and yes, we went through that, but like my parents' best friends, they lost their best friends. My grandparents, the community members, they all lost a community member, a friend. And I mean, their funeral just goes to show that there was people carrying in chairs of their own to attend the funeral in the church. Like this church doesn't belong in a tiny community. It's massive. And it was filled with firefighters and people from the hospital. And so, now as an adult, I can reflect and just think like, what did they all go through and the trauma that it affected them as. And then, you have a judge who's blaming you on top of that for not doing enough as community members. So I can't imagine what some of them have lived through.
It's remarkable just to listen to you and hear the compassion from your side to even understand that angle of the effect it has on others when you've experienced, besides something just as incredibly traumatic in itself, also the opposite of compassion when it comes to them blaming the town and not taking any sort of responsibility in regards to the way it was handled. So I don't have any long direction of this comment. I just want to acknowledge that it's beautiful to see the compassion that you have, even just to see that despite what you've gone through.
Thank you so much.
Truly.
That means a lot.
Truly. And the community, the support that you've had. I know you said your aunt didn't. It's a whole other rabbit hole. I'm going to bite my tongue, but that she didn't send you to therapy. So was the community and the support arguably one of the biggest factors in regards to you still being here today?
Yeah. Yeah. My community. Absolutely. I just did an event where I was speaking, and one of the folks who was a part of, holding this event, he was talking about community and like just the importance of that. And it made me think, and I can't speak for my brothers. So like, I don't want it to take away from them, but I just think that I had, in a weird way, because you're a teenager at one point and you don't know who you are, but I feel like in one way I knew who I was the whole time, if that makes sense, like knowing who you are. I think there's this gentleman that it was his event that I was speaking at specifically said, like, it's important for us to know where we come from and who we are. And I just think that while my older brother actually wasn't born in Manitoba, he did actually come from St. Catharines. I just think it's hard sometimes. So I just question, maybe I had a little bit more knowing, and I wouldn't have said that when I was younger. I can reflect on that now that I've known who I was a little more along the way. But yeah, the support wasn't there. And then for mental health, and at the age of 29, my older brother killed himself. And it was, I always say this, and I always follow with this part, is that was harder to lose him than to go through what I went through with my parents. Because he was like, I don't know, he was my person.
Just when you think the story ends somewhere, it just continues on.
Yeah.
So he was turning 18, then he was 29 when he took his life. So, another 10 to 12 years, give or take. What was that decade plus with him in regards to where he was, or what you noticed, or what your relationship was after that big event?
I mean, I saw him in a different light. I'm sure other people might be able to see other things. But I mean, he was my older brother. He could do no wrong. You know, he had a family of his own, and we still were very close. He was in the city, but he was like one of those that if I could spend time with him, I wanted to. Like when I was little, I would just like wait, and you know, I got to sleep over at his house. I was so happy, and then I was obviously older at that time when he died, and to me, it came out of nowhere. Now maybe for other people it didn't, but to me it came out of nowhere. I was shocked.
Right. I mean, especially as the big brother, you don't know what he's just protecting you from, let alone, sure, he could do it to other people, but especially as the baby girl. So when you learn that happens outside of a million different directions, I'm sure you can express what you were going through or still go through. Did that reopen the entire experience of when you were younger, thinking about how everything panned out?
No, because I think at that point I wasn't even aware of like my own things that I would be going through for mental health, right? Like I'm still processing, and I wasn't doing what I'm doing now with advocacy work. So I was just genuinely, it happened to me. My brother died, and it was awful. And, you know, it did shift one thing for me. I was driving down the street. It was like this epiphany. And I saw a woman walking her dog. And I thought, oh, life goes on. And I was like bawling, just thinking, I can't believe he's not here. I was beside myself. And I thought, oh, okay, life goes on. And I was like, either you move forward, not to say like you have to forget, but you move forward and you have to keep going or let it consume you, because at that point I was letting it consume me. I remember lying on my couch in my apartment and just being surrounded by my friends and just completely devastated by it. It's like, I mean, you know, that hit of like over and over where you're like, it's not that your mind forgets, but it lets you for a second. Yeah. And then it's a punch in the face immediately at that beginning stages of grief. And so it was like, either I'm going to keep going or I'm going to be consumed by this. Like I did not want to continue on. I remember thinking like, I want to die. I want to kill myself. I don't want to live without him. And I had no regards for my younger brother at all at that time. Like I was just like, this is, I can't do this anymore. I can't think about someone else. So even when my younger brother went to hug me, it was very much a push down of his arms. Like, do not touch me. Don't touch me. I don't want to be hugged. I don't want to be touched.
Where was that coming from? Because I mean, it's obviously it's a natural reaction. Like you're going through so much right now. So I don't think it defines any way you feel towards your brother. It's just you're in this point. Yeah. You're just floating at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I actually never even thought about that until, well, years later when I had to go through it all over again. So, in between this, after my older brother died, shortly after, my cousin messaged me and she was like, there's a national inquiry for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirited Plus folks. Is this something you think you would be interested in? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it was normal for me to share my story. And at that point I was already not really like speaking, but somewhat. And my family talked about it in a normal way. So I was like, yeah, okay, absolutely. So the inquiry, for people that are wondering, is we had a national inquiry because of the rates of Indigenous people, but women and girls and Two-Spirited people go missing and are murdered. To throw a statistic out there, it's 12%. So 12 times. Sorry, 12 times. I am 12 times more likely to go missing or to be murdered because I'm Indigenous and I have a daughter. So unfortunately, that statistic lands on her as well. Indigenous men are actually, I believe now, have a higher percent rate of going missing and being murdered. But at the time, these were grassroots organizations that were calling on this because there were so many cases that were happening. So I said yes. And then that opened up my world of advocacy. And then I started speaking and sharing more because then I was meeting people who have almost identical stories as to me. 2 families that have almost identical stories with the police, with the wait time, with the stalking, all of the things. And so it just blew my mind.
And this is outside of the 2 stories you started off, just across the board, across the nation?
Yeah.
In Indigenous areas?
Yeah. Yeah. And so so then that's where I started wanting to share more and more. And so I had been doing that. And then, I was advocating and talking a little bit about mental health. I mean, I myself. So when I was turning 38 years old, I decided to start a GoFundMe because I wanted, not for myself, let me say that very clearly. It was not for me. It was for 2 Indigenous organizations, one in my hometown community and then one in St. Catharines, where I live now. It's called Abbey House. It's a transitional home for Indigenous women. And I thought, okay, well, I want to celebrate, the fact that I am still here. And I would be the first person in my family turning 38. No one had turned 38 at that point. It was me next in line. And it was a fear. Like, it was a genuine fear. I almost didn't press enter on the GoFundMe. And I share this. I wish I could share that. I mean, not that I want anyone to ever feel this, but the fear not to press enter because I thought no one has cared. Like, all of a sudden it was like a slap in the face. I was like so excited. I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And then I just was sitting at my desk like, what are you doing? No one cared. Why is anyone ever going to donate to this? Like, no one cares. And so I press enter magically. And within 24 hours, we raised $10,000. We, not me, community, raised $10,000. And then from there, to date, we're at just under $110,000 on the GoFundMe because I kept it going because people want to help. So I was going to give them a place that they could, help and support. I'm often asked, and it's a big ask. It's a big ask, like, where can we help and how can we help, and helping Indigenous communities and organizations. So I just think, okay, if there's a GoFundMe, an outlet for people to be able to give back, and I often tell people, like, if you know of an Indigenous organization or a walk, like a march to bring awareness, go to that. Like, community helps. Seeing people out there actually helps have that support.
Yeah, it's twofold with the community that helped you get through it as a child, and now it's come full circle for helping others, and I'm sure part of the healing journey for you.
Yeah.
You said, I didn't want to skip over it because
No.
you said right before you started this journey, you got to go through this again with your other brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after all of that, I reflected on my own mental health, and it obviously wasn't where I needed it to be, but I wasn't necessarily paying full attention to people around me and their own mental health because sometimes it's not as obvious as we think. But I could see a decline in my younger brother's mental health in 2023. And I had said to him, why don't you come out? Come out to the Friendship Center. I've never shared this. Come out to the Friendship Center and there's a men's group, talk to them, like, it could help you. He just was not being the person he was. He was the happy guy. It's so cliche. He was the happy guy. He was the guy that was like, he's also a father, an incredible father. I'm jealous of how good of a dad he was because I will never amount to him being a mom the way he was as a dad. And I said, come out. And he was like, no, I don't need to. I was like, but you could just sit and talk. Anyway, he didn't come. And the beginning of November, I looked at my husband, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I looked at my husband and I said, he's going to kill himself. I know it. And my husband looked at me and said, why would you say that? I said, I know. I know. And I offered him again that night. I said, come out, like, talk to someone. You have to. And I was like, anyway, he made a comment and I hung up the phone. And not even a week later, just over a week later, he killed himself. And that was, no. My husband walked in the house and I looked at him and I said, who died? And he just shook his head and screamed.
I'm so sorry.
So that was just over a year ago. So I'm in the thick of processing it all.
I know it's been only a year, and everything you've continued to go through. Does that time you saw that woman walking with the dog, reflecting life goes on, does that still hold true to you?
I mean, yeah. And now I think that I want to say I'm not out of the grief, but I'm out of the cloud of grief. That I feel positive that I can say that I am like, no, you have to keep moving forward for your kids. Someone actually commented on the video that like connected us, and it just, I will carry that for the rest of my life. And it was one comment that said, please stay alive.
Yeah, I would echo that.
I had never thought of that. So, yeah.
I'm glad you're here sharing it because, it's one of those things that obviously I can't relate to. I feel it in my bones right now. I don't feel what you feel because it's your experience, but, you're here doing what you're doing and you're still going. And I know you will continue to go.
Yeah.
And for you to still be, again, as I already said earlier about the compassion that I could see in your eyes, even beyond the tears right now, you're an inspiration.
Thank you.
You are, truly. So if there's, of course, you have your one child?
No, I have 3.
3, God bless you. It's 3 amazing reasons to keep going.
Yeah.
So I just want to commend you for being willing to continually persevere through everything you've gone through because it's very heavy and it's hard.
Thank you. I appreciate the space. Because like, I know you just reached out and we connected, but I want you to know, like, me sharing genuinely leaves a piece of healing. I say this every time because it's actually true. Every time I share, there is something that comes up, something new that comes up. And I, like, literally sitting here, I thought, oh, there it is, because I know it's going to come up, and it gives me healing. I had said to an elder once, I feel bad for sharing, and he said, why? And I said, because I leave feeling like, not good, obviously, but I leave feeling healed more, let's say, because it's not linear. I'll never come to the end of the journey, but I just want to say I'm grateful for having the space to share and to bring awareness, because I want people to now challenge their thoughts, that they look at me and they see me for who I am. Would you have felt the same way? Would you have listened this much if I looked a little different? Would you feel the same empathy?
Well, I want to thank you for even saying for the space, but you're the one that's filling up the space. So the space is empty without your words. So
Thank you.
You're delivering the goods right now. And it's just wild to me when I'm hearing a story like this. I've never heard a story obviously specific to this because this is unique in itself, even though there is the ancillary effect that this seems to be this happens.
Yeah.
As you shared with other people of the community. And I just want to ask you, this part of this journey of helping others and trying to actively do something to this, is it just the speaking and the letting out that you think feels part of this journey, or is it convoluted with the new things that come up and the actions to actually make a difference? Is all this part of this healing journey for you? Yeah,
I think all of it, and meeting people. Like, I really do believe that coming along this journey and meeting and speaking with people, I'm supposed to meet these people, and there's just something that I'm going to carry with them for the rest of my life. I'd say to my husband, sometimes we'll go to gatherings together, community gatherings, and he just knows just as much as I do, like that I'm going to forever remember that person's story. I'm going to remember what they went through. And I mean, that's always the hope, right? It was an elder from Australia that said, now that you heard my story, what will you do with it now? And I just thought that was so powerful, because it's like, how will you move forward? And the hope is that I'll move forward in one way, having met you, and take that part of your story with me to maybe help someone else. And then I hope that happens from my story too. It can't all be for nothing, right? So.
No. And that, that's my personal belief in spiritual woo-woo, if you want to call it, because it's odd to even contemplate. I mean, maybe it's just societally odd when you try to contemplate the weird little gifts that come from such horrible experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you would verbally say that or not, there's so many little nuggets there that you just express in the people that you're meeting. And I always say, I'm not comparing experiences, but when my dad died when I was 12, it took years to get there. But I always say, I would grab my little grief receipt and return all these gifts that I'm saying to have him back.
100%. It's literally what you're saying is, I say that time and time again. Yeah.
But nevertheless, you even say, life keeps going and so should I. And then you ask the question, how we move forward. But sometimes I feel like it's a balance of kind of letting go of being obsessed with the how, as long as you're decisive on continually moving forward. And along the way, you kind of just trust the natural flow of this weird happening of life, and that it does come to you in some weird, strange way. I mean, I'm not speaking for you, but you're on this very clear, specific path that I would ask you, do you see this happening? You know what I mean? Like, not the events, like the follow-up.
No, absolutely. Exactly how you literally, I feel like you and I have had this conversation, because I kid you not, one of my friends and I, we say this all the time. I would, of course, I don't want to be living. Like, I would change it in a heartbeat, but I can't. So what will I do with it then?
That's
right?
the question.
Is it going to consume me? Because if it's going to consume me, then take me now, because then what's the point, right? Mm-hmm. Or just keep moving forward in a way. And like, I know, I get it. I hate that everything happens for a reason. But this is like a different way of looking at it, right? Yes. So, yeah.
And I mean, it's not even, I think maybe it's, like that sentence does get a little nauseating rap once in a while, but maybe it's more like a question form. So maybe instead of saying that everything happens for a reason, like it's decisive, because it's the meaning you give it.
Right.
So if you want to say everything happens for a reason, that's your meaning. And someone else could say, no, there's no reason. This is bullshit. This is just bad stuff happening for no reason, yada, yada, yada. Then you're giving it a reason. That's in fact your reasoning, which means nothing. So that's partially the same answer, but it's just, what if there is a reason? It's just kind of throwing up like fairy dust in the sky and saying, what if there is a reason? Again, I would trade it all for, as will you.
Yeah.
But what if there's a reason that it's giving me some kind of path to move forward instead of it consuming me? I just wonder, what is the difference between you and other people that don't let it consume you? Even though it's going to consume you inevitably at some point throughout the time, it might show up, like you said, or in the early phases, it's partially consuming you, but it's like, how do you move forward with that consumption and not letting it define you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, how? Like, what is that tick of you? Obviously you have 3 kids, but what is that difference with you personally? Do you know? Like, when you saw that, some people see a woman walking a dog and say, oh, life keeps going on. And some people are like, oh, look at that dog's ass. It's gross. And not looking at it in a profound way. You know what I mean? So there's what is that?
I have no idea. Actually, so one of my really good friends who, she's gone through a lot in her life too. We've had this conversation. What is the difference of making us tick? And I can't tell you. I'll say the community, the people around me. Yeah. I'm really lucky. I'm not without. Don't feel bad for me for what I've gone through, because I do. I think it is. I truly 100% believe it's the people around me, and whether they're put in my life for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. It's all them.
It's funny you say that, because I I'm in the process of, I'm working with a publisher and I have a book coming out eventually, and this isn't me sliding. Guys, for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm not promoting the book. It's not even close to being out. So like,
yes, he is. And he's gonna send me a signed copy right away.
Yeah, there we go. But the reason I'm saying that, because the part I was recently writing, I even said to whatever chapter it was, I was like, I feel like sometimes I don't deserve any credit. Not that I need credit, but I was like, the support that I had in my own experience, off the scales of grief, it was like I had the support, and I feel guilty at sometimes because of the support that I had. And I understand there's so many people that may be listening right now that don't have that support.
Yeah.
And that's where you come in. That's where this conversation comes in. It might be not the traditional support that we have felt through physical community, even though that still exists. There are options out there. I know plenty of them.
Yeah.
If that's what you need to seek. But there is that idea of this being an individual experience of grief makes you feel alone, in my opinion. Like, again, my dad died in 9/11, so it was communal. It was in your face. I was far from alone, but the experience of grief is so unique to the individual, from me to my sisters. That feels isolating.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like in the inherent experience of grief that is individual, unique, and alone, support is the other side of the spectrum. So I do implore people to stay on your shelf for a little bit if you want. You can do that. I think that's part of the process too, figuring it out. But at some point, it's a decision. And that becomes off insensitive. Some people might not be there right now. I'm not saying there's a timeline for that, but there is a point where there's a level of accountability in everything we do.
Absolutely. I 100% agree so much. I just think of after my younger brother died, the support that I had because of the fundraiser that I continue to have. I have a partial one that's offline that goes with the GoFundMe hand in hand. And all I can picture around me the night after my parents died, all my aunts and uncles around me and my best friend coming to the house to see me. I picture that when my older brother died, all of my friends around me. And then I picture when my younger brother died, all of my friends around me, and just rallied. When I say they quite literally put on my brother's memorial, they did it. Wow. I had one of my dear friends, they flew in to help support me and my husband, and who does that? And I just remember thinking after, oh my gosh, how will I? And I know it's not about payback, but you can't help but feel that gratitude. How will I ever pay these people back? Because they don't understand how much it means, right? They're being wonderful people, but I could cry every time I think about what they did for me. So,
I mean, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Despite all the darkness that you just expressed in regards to your experience, there's so much light that I'm seeing from you at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing for you to acknowledge that. And it's nice to, I'm sure none of them are, based on what they're doing for you, I'm sure none of them care about any kudos, but here you are in Dead Talks, giving them a little bit of kudos, whoever's listening, any of your friends, family, or supporters. We don't have to get into it, but it's just I just want to acknowledge it. There's there's so many layers to this experience. Yours in particular, so many layers that we already tapped into, and we didn't even go down the rabbit hole of the injustice behind it, and a sense of the negligence in that I'm sure just weighs on you. But how are you today in regards to everything you've gone through and where you are?
Still processing. Therapy's wonderful. It's great. If you're not in therapy, then you're not cool. So join the cool club. Come on.
I guess I'm a loser, but I feel like this podcast every guest is my therapist in many ways, as weird as that sounds.
It's important. Yeah. I just call it the cool kid club because I think I remember when I was younger thinking oh my gosh, it was just so taboo.
Today it's way more. You need it. It's if you don't have a therapist, like you said, you're the loser.
Yeah, come on. And I'm never going to cut. I think at the end of it, just know there's no end. There's no end. I actually saw a quote in a book. My friend shared it, and I wish I could remember who it was. And it was basically you want to go into therapy to deal with the shit that you have, but then you're in therapy, and now you're dealing with the shit from therapy that is making you feel, but then you feel really good from the therapy, but then sometimes you feel really shitty. And it's that's just what it is. It's just an outlet to help you process things. So, it's... I mean, I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back. I was just had an episode with someone. We harped on the idea that the more I learn in life, the less I know. And it's almost like the more you learn about yourself, the less you know, because you realize there's so much.
Yeah.
So you learn more, but then you know less because it's just a continual unraveling of what this weird little existence is. But I think behind it,
we're floating on a rock.
We're literally, the world's spinning right now.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting here on a real chair that's not moving. It doesn't make any sense, which makes it all magical in my opinion.
I want to say, I'm actually a really strong believer too, like not just like a therapist, like Western therapy, whatever your therapy is, what it is to you. Yours is this podcast. That's great. For me, for the longest time, like my therapy it is technically Western, but it's not, it's traditional.
Okay.
And like the first place that I went afterwards, after my brother died, I can't even believe that I went out in public, but I went drumming like we have at our friendship center. I went drumming with community.
And it's physical.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then the men's group actually drummed an honor song for my brother. And I thought that was just so amazing. And so like I often think like just maybe your therapy is think about when you're feeling really good. And it not be like the vice that's making you like forget about it, but like you're feeling good and yourself and you're whole. Maybe that's your therapy, but just like do that, you know? So I do want to acknowledge that I'm not saying, I mean, Western medicine, like or therapy is sometimes not exactly. Of
course, yeah. I would hope people are smart enough to realize we're just talking and then you're not implying that, but I appreciate the clarification. I think it's just trying you have to try things. Yeah. And that implies action and movement and trying.
Absolutely.
And I am always a fan of physicality. I think the physical expression, even, you know, I forget what cultures, I don't know if it was the Lakota or what indigenous tribes sometimes cut off their hair in regards to when someone dies. And that was a physical expression of the sorrow. Yeah. And again, that just always reminded me of that physical expression. There is a physicality, let alone mental and spiritual. There is a physicality to grief. And so I think some sort of physical expression works for me. Like when it's working out, going for a run, getting outside, or even
running for me is like
physicality is even if you're not grieving. I'm talking about just life in general. Movement is good. Go for a walk. Try it out. Or if you're laying down, get suffocated on Selling Sunset on Netflix, I will not recommend that because that show sucks. But that's a whole other rabbit hole of a conversation. Is there anything else you feel like you want to get out there? If you want to also talk about like specific shout outs to the work you're doing. I will link all that in the show notes, of course. Yeah,
please do that. I have the fundraiser, so anyone listening that wants to donate or get in contact and support, please do. And then they can follow me on all my socials. It's just at Fallon Farinacci for TikTok and Instagram. So.
Yeah, and then as anyone that's new to the show or not new to the show, I usually link everything in the show notes, and so we'll make sure everyone can see that. Is there anything else you want to?
No, just thank you so much for the space.
Thank you. For real, the space is always here. So in case you ever want to come back, thank you. Seriously, I appreciate it. Seriously, that's it's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And I'm honored to sit across from the table from you. And you know, I know you're not looking for any kind of credit, but I commend you for everything that you're doing. And keep walking that dog.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, guys. Thank you for listening to our wonderful story, profound story. And until next time, this is David, Dead Talks. See you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.